Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for our state. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. Once again, we've got 10 pounds of news to stuff into a 5-pound bag. The on-again, off-again, on-again war in Iran, Trump at war with the Pope, and the billionaire class at war with all of us. Plus, why all these stories matter to Hoosiers. I got a couple great guests to join me in talking about all of that and more. But first, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers. We certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 for the whole year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at HoosLeft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at now. Let's welcome this week's guests, not one, but two Indiana Democratic State Senate candidates. First, a newcomer to this space from Senate District 11, way up there in the South Bend, Elkhart area. It is Gabrianna Gratzol. Gabby, welcome.
Hi. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Hey, tell the folks just a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am Gabrianna. I'm running in Senate District 11. That's the northern portion of Elkhart and St. Joe County. I am a factory worker. I'm a mom, a wife, and I have a background in behavioral health and, just really trying to fight for working class Hoosiers and working class issues.
Well, I'll tell you what, we appreciate that. And you know what? Another person out there doing the same thing, but clear on the other end of the state, is a returning guest and one of our favorites from down there on the Ohio River in District 47. It's Ethan Sweetland-May.
Hey.
Ethan,
Scott, thanks for having me back. I'm so excited to be honest with Gabrianna. I've been seeing your work as well. By the way, it's Ethan Sweetland-May. I'm running for District 47, which is Floyd, Harrison, Washington County down here along the Ohio River. I've served this area as a garbage man for 11 years. I'm a dad. I'm a worker. I'm a husband. And fighting for a better standard of living and better quality of life for everyone in Southern Indiana.
Well, I'm glad to have both of you here. Looking forward to today's discussion. Like I said, 10 pounds of news into a 5-pound bag. This thing is packed, so let's go ahead and jump right in. And we're going to start where we've been the last several weeks now. And if you weren't watching the news this week and felt like you were losing your mind, you weren't. This is really what happened. At the end of last week, recall, Pakistan brokered a ceasefire framework between the United States and Iran, one that explicitly required Israel to stop bombing Lebanon as a condition of the deal. Israel did not stop bombing Lebanon, so Iran kept the Strait of Hormuz closed. And Donald Trump, rather than, picking up the phone and telling Israel to knock it off, decided the right move was to launch a naval blockade of Iranian ports. Oh, yeah? You're going to block the strait? Well, I double dog block the strait. Because the man is a 79-year-old toddler. Now, to their credit, the administration did then bring Israeli and Lebanese negotiators together for the first direct talks in over 30 years right here in Washington, with Israeli airstrikes, of course, continuing during the negotiations. Eventually, a ceasefire there took hold. Israel stood down, and Iran, in what I will describe as a remarkably good faith gesture, given the circumstances, opened the Strait of Hormuz. Trump immediately went on television, declared that Iran had agreed to never close the strait again, suspend its nuclear program forever, and surrender its enriched uranium. Iran had agreed to none of those things. What did the United States do in response to this diplomatic win? We kept the blockade. So, of course, Iran once again closed the strait, started shooting at tankers that attempted to make their way through yesterday. That is where we are. Gabrianna, how the hell are you supposed to negotiate with an administration like ours that doesn't appear to hold up its end of the bargain?
Well, I mean, how do you negotiate with someone who is not operating in reality? Like, it is, the claiming that agreements were made on issues that were definitely not made, not only damages, I don't know that there's any real relationship to be salvaged, but I mean, what it does on a world stage, like, everybody's watching, everybody's lost faith in the U.S. as a superpower, and we've shown just how dangerous we can be when, like, the wrong person is at the helm. And now I just worry about the long-term implications, like what the administration treats like a secret, the influence of Israel and all of the financial conflicts of interest. I mean, it's very apparent on a world stage, and people are watching, and I worry about how these decisions and how the incompetence is going to affect future conflicts, future agreements. It doesn't look good from where I sit.
Just from a branding standpoint, the U.S. brand is pretty tarnished right now. We could elect Jesus Christ as president in 2028, and I don't know how we're going to reclaim our standing on the world stage. Ethan, what the hell was the point of this entire week? It seems like we ended up exactly where we started, except with a whole lot of extra unnecessary death in Lebanon in between.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a viral sound clip that's been going around the social media. You might have seen it or heard it. It's the "I'm alive, I'm dead. I'm alive, I'm dead again." And that's definitely how this ceasefire feels. Where it's just like clear from where I sit, the president and his allies are engaging in blatant market manipulation, as well as just trying to bump day by day their sagging ratings, their sagging approval of polls. And
yeah, Trump's something sagging.
Your words, Scott, not mine.
Yeah.
And the lack of seriousness about this, somehow one of the most despotic and repressive regimes in the world, which is Iran, hanging protesters from cranes in public squares, like one of truly a disgusting and despotic regime. This has been so poorly managed and so badly planned that it has made Iran a sympathetic looking group to much of the world and has made the United States look like a bumbling wannabe dictator. And that's something we can thank the present administration for. And I think that every American, as they watch prices go up, as they watch gas go up, and as we see the looming fuel crisis, can rightly be outraged about.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit and the economic cost. So, while all of this geopolitical theater was playing out, the Trump administration, of course, intends to escalate sanctions under the banner of Operation Economic Fury, which sounds like a rejected Fast and Furious sequel, planning to board and seize Iranian-linked oil tankers in international waters, expanding the operation well beyond the Persian Gulf under the Indo-Pacific Command's authority. Now, meanwhile, the head of the International Energy Agency is warning that Europe has roughly 6 weeks of jet fuel left. 6 weeks. KLM is already cutting flights. The IEA chief is calling this the largest energy crisis ever faced and warns that even if a deal gets done tomorrow, over 80 regional energy facilities have been damaged, more than a third of them severely, and it could take up to 2 years to restore pre-war production levels. The people who will suffer most, as always, are the ones with the least to say in any of this, developing nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, while the powers whose decisions caused the crisis find ways to insulate themselves from the worst of it. Of course, Ethan, this is how it always goes, right? It seems that those with the least responsibility wind up paying the price in these great power struggles, doesn't it?
Now as always. And the United States continues to refuse to learn the lesson of the imperial boomerang. We continue to believe that we can act with impunity, with expansionism, with interventionism, words that even in the right are ringing with sour notes. Like many people, farmers that I'm talking to in Harrison County here on the Ohio River, people who you would not think would either care, or if they do care, they'd be solely like, yeah, let's get them. Not the case. Not the case. This is causing deep inroads into the Conservative Party, because foundational to the Conservative Party, in which I was very much raised, in which I have made the same arguments, this is not acceptable. This kind of constant interventionism, this flexing without purpose, this violence without strategy, that creates so much debt on our side. It creates loss of life on our side. And of course, it kills people, innocent people in their homes, in their schools, abroad. And the broad majority of Americans are sick to death of it.
And, Gabrianna, I've raised this point repeatedly over the last several weeks of this war on this program, and every new development seems to reinforce it. That's the absolute folly of building the entire world's economy on oil. We've had decades to rectify this now. Why haven't we learned?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where you apply stress and then you see where the weak points are. And I hate that we were in a position to really try to parse that out, to really work on that development. And now the steady march backward. When I look at issues, I try to triage like what the most emergent need is. And like, we have to now, instead of working on, building our infrastructure around renewable energy and solving these issues and really combating climate change, now we have to stop people from dying and people from like dying in senseless wars. We have to stop brown people from being bombed. We have to stop rural Americans from being starved in food deserts. And it's really frustrating from our position, because we are in a lot of ways at the mercy of this system. And I don't know, I would love to see a march toward cleaner, renewable energy. And I think that when we do take power back, because it's happening, it's going to happen, we are poised for not just a blue wave, but like an unprecedented takeover. And I think that what is vitally important is what we do with the power when we get it. And I see so much fighting going on in the Democratic Party about what kind of candidates can win and what direction we want to take the party. And I see the fight going on about electability and where money has a place in politics. And I think we need to zoom out and look at this not so much as like, oh, what do we need to do to claw back power now? We need to ride this wave, this momentum, and we need to make sure that we have leaders in place to take this power and actually create change that validates our points. Like, when people feel the positive impacts of our policy, then they're not going to be as susceptible to the propaganda, the partisan bullshit. Frankly, they're going to vote as they always have, with how policy affects them. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on, is what can we do when we do get power back to try to fix these systemic issues.
Yeah, and if we've learned anything from the Trump era, it's that you can't be afraid to go big. Like, for all the criticisms, and there are a multitude of this man, like, again, where do we even begin? We've got 10 years of bullcrap piled up behind us, but it certainly going big didn't prevent him from getting elected twice. We need to go big in the other direction to start rolling this thing back. We'll talk about Hungary much later on in the show, and I wanted to, look at the way their new leader is talking about things there. We could learn a lesson or two, but let's talk about the Indiana angle to this war. It goes beyond just the gas prices that Hoosiers are paying at the pump, right? There's a couple stories this week, and they point in a couple different directions. Now, first, Governor Braun announced this week a $60 million initiative called Iron Nation Indiana, designed to attract Israeli tech companies to set up U.S. operations in our state. The state is putting in $15 million of your tax money. Now, I'll let you draw your own conclusions about the timing of a $60 million Indiana-Israel economic partnership announcement in the middle of an active war that even allies like Britain and Spain are calling senseless. But the second Indiana angle is darker still. Tom Pigott, writing at The Big Money on Substack, subscribe, by the way, he's doing good work over there, published an investigative piece this week alleging that Indiana's Applied Research Institute, a state-funded public-private partnership with the presidents of both Purdue and IU on its board, help fast-track Palantir's AI targeting software into military use. That software, called Maven Smart System, consolidates surveillance and targeting into a single platform where hundreds of targets can be selected in minutes. The piece links it directly to a strike on an Iranian elementary school that killed 156 girls on the first day of the war. Indiana institutions, Indiana tax dollars, Indiana fingerprints all over that. Gabby, Indiana has already invested tens of millions of dollars into Israeli war bonds, and now we've got this Iron Nation initiative on top of it. How do you feel about tying Hoosiers at the hip to a global pariah state?
I mean, to me, it doesn't sound very American first. So one thing that I hear a lot in the just the U.S. relationship with Israel is like, oh, well, you're running for a state position, so it's a federal issue. But time and time again, we see that it's not. The overlap it's glaring. And I'm sorry, but hey, like, morality aside, like, we have kids here who are getting dropped from like the child care vouchers. We have kids here who aren't going to be able to eat over the summer. We have families, we have healthcare deserts, we have food deserts, we have so many needs that are being unmet, and we're bragging about a surplus and bragging about the size of our rainy day fund. And the storm is here. We are, like, Hoosiers are struggling, and they are prioritizing other nations' conflicts to pander to ideology. This isn't about what Israel is going to do to help Indiana. This is about how they can best endear themselves to the far right wing Christian nationalist agenda. And that is such an overarching theme in like the Indiana GOP. I remember when I was digging into state politics, I looked at their website, because I had gotten into like the NDEM's website, and I was just kind of like looking, navigating, seeing what was there, and I wanted to see the contrast. So I went to the Indiana GOP website, and their statement of like organization or whatever had very little to do with politics. It was all Christian nationalist rhetoric, not Christian value-based rhetoric, Christian nationalist rhetoric. And there is anyone who is raised in religion, anyone who's raised like anywhere near Christian nationalism, like I was, like most of us in Indiana are. Yeah, I see you, Ethan. We recognize that, and I think that we need people who understand that playbook in the State House, because they will lie. They will try to frame it as like, this is what's beneficial for Hoosiers. These are Christian values that benefit our politics, but we know better. And I think calling that out when it happens is vitally important. And yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ethan, this Applied Research Institute, like we said, it's a state-funded institution. Hoosier tax dollars, right? And Pickett's piece draws a direct line from that institution to this strike that killed those girls in an Iranian elementary school. How do we reckon with the fact that we have all those girls' blood on our hands? And look, Gabrianna mentioned it. You know, we're essentially killing kids overseas directly, but here we're just starving them slowly, right? Oh, you're muted, sir.
How about now?
There you're good. Yeah.
I don't know how I did that. Thank you. So one of the things that I think we really should let hit home is that, yes, this is on all of us. That our government's ability to do this is on all of us. I think it's a favorite conceit to be like, well, not my president. Well, I didn't vote for him. And I'm like, fine, it's us. It's us. And frankly, whenever we deal with these things, we need to deal with them as people who are on the inside, not shouting at it from across the street. That's part. I mean, like, whenever I talk about Christian nationalism and the impact that it has on our unconsidered and blind support for another state like Israel, that we need to be. I want to address that as somebody who has very much been on the inside. I'm not talking to some other community. I'm not talking to some other culture. This is my community. This is my culture. And whenever we address it, we need to address it with the values, in my opinion, that these cultures really adhere to. Things like limited government, things like putting your community first, things like oversight of our millions of dollars and where they're going and what they're really doing. Because, again, bringing up these people that I'm talking to in my community, rural communities, they don't much like the idea of funding killer AI systems that allow for the autonomous selection of targets that we have already proven kill schoolgirls. No one is much on board for that. And yes, you're going to ignore the comments section is not a good poll of Harrison County. It is not a good poll of Washington County. And most of these things depend on the misunderstanding and or just ignorance, not stupidity, just not knowing of most people in our communities. So being able to articulate it, not from up here shouting down, but in here where it's like, this is what they're doing with our money, guys. This is what's happening to people in other places with our money. Do we want that? And the answer is overwhelmingly no.
Yeah, and just from a Christian perspective, right? Like, is this what Jesus would do? I don't think so. Let's get into that. In addition to Iranian clerics, right? Trump has gone to war with other religious officials, like the Pope. And this one's been building for months. Back in January, Pentagon officials summoned the Vatican's ambassador and reportedly delivered a bitter lecture warning the church had better take America's side, with one official allegedly invoking the Avignon papacy, a 14th century crisis where popes were basically forced to live under the thumb of the French crown. Just a casual threat. And Pete Hegseth, of course, spent months framing this war in explicitly religious terms, asking Americans to pray on bended knee for military victory in the name of Jesus Christ. So when Pope Leo came out against the war, called for peace and dialogue, Trump called him weak on crime and bad on foreign policy and refused to apologize. Leo fired back from the papal plane, saying he doesn't fear the Trump administration and will keep speaking out. Now, staying on the blasphemy train, this week Trump also posted an image of himself in a Jesus-like healing pose on social media, which he has since deleted, claiming he thought it showed him as a doctor. Then J.D. Vance, a Catholic of 6 whole years, told the Vicar of Christ himself to be careful in discussing theology, and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops pushed back. These are not lefty radicals. They reminded the vice president that the Pope is not his rival, but, like we said, the vicar of Christ. So, and when you've lost the bishops, a notoriously conservative group, you have lost the room. Ethan, the man posted an image of himself as Jesus on social media, and his explanation was that he thought it showed him as a doctor. Did someone tell him to say the image was doctored? But his brain is just made of pudding at this point, and it didn't come out right?
I think that's the best case scenario. Honestly, I think that is the best case scenario, that that an elderly man was given directions by his staff that he misunderstood. I think that's the best case scenario. I don't think that's what happened. I think that our president very much liked the comparison of himself to a holy figure like Jesus of Nazareth, liked the adoring poses of the people around him, the fighter plane screeching overhead, the flag in the background of the beneficent bestowment of the healing gift on somebody who needed his touch. And that this is also the same man who has the friggin' audacity to turn around and say with a straight face that, oh yeah, no, I just thought I was a doctor working for the Red Cross, and anybody that doesn't agree with me isn't my ally anymore, and also is fake news. That's the level of madness that we are dealing with. And I don't use the word madness pejoratively. I mean, like, the emperor has no clothes, and we are forced to watch his group of handlers who are profiting off of him and who are protecting their power do everything they can to keep the naked emperor on the throne right now.
I like how he said that, like, the Pope is weak on crime, right? Listen, he might have his own plane, he might have a Pope mobile, and he might wear a cape, but he is not Batman, right? It is not his job to fight crime. Gabrianna, you are up there in South Bend, Elkhart area, heavily Catholic. How is this going over up that way? I mean, look, J.D. Vance might be a spineless weasel, but it takes some cojones to lecture the Pope on Catholic doctrine when you converted like yesterday.
No, I will say my mother-in-law is staunchly Catholic. I believe she's a triple Trump voter, and my husband likes to just poke at her any chance that he gets. And he's like, hey, so did you see Trump's fighting with the Pope? And it was, I think, one of the first times we've seen her just like so fed up with him, like with Trump. It was kind of funny. But yeah, the fact that he's a recent, like, that JD Vance is a recent convert, and like knowing just the culture in the Catholic faith, like of, you know, the cradle Catholics versus the recent converts, and talking down to the Pope, I just don't. It's interesting because we saw a swing with Catholic voters. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was somewhere they were, I think it was around 54 or 55% in favor of Obama. And then in 2008, because then it steadily grew farther right every following election. And then this past election, it was almost completely inverse Trump. And so that kind of support from the Catholic community is, if that's something that's lost, that is going to heavily impact like future elections. Also, like to the whole AI image of Dr. Trump, I think maybe it's reason for hope, because if images like that is what he's seeing when he's in the doctor's office, might be closer to the end than we think. But no, he really does seem to think that he is invincible, and the audacity is, it just doesn't shock me anymore. There's nothing he holds sacred. So I'm curious to see what the results are going to be. I watched or I listened to this podcast talk like about focus groups and really digging into the responses from Catholic Harris voters and Catholic Trump voters, and they don't seem to be moving very far. And this is just based on one focus group, and I think it's reflective of the priming that he has done for the past 10 years. I watched too many of his rallies leading up to the 2024 election because I just want to know, like, what is he saying? What does he do that gets people so loyal to him? And I really see a priming before these actions. And the talking out of both sides of his mouth. On one hand, he ran on No More Wars, but then on the other hand, while he's doing these wars, you see this fetishization of war efforts. We see the videos glamorizing them, making him out to be a Michael Bay movie, and in the same breath, claiming that he has ended 8, soon to be 9 wars, and claiming that he should be given the Nobel Peace Prize. So he really does. He creates a space that welcomes cognitive dissonance because he gives people an out. That's why he's so contradictory from our perspective in what he says.
Yeah, and we have to remember most people aren't nearly as plugged in as we are. It's all vibes. A lot of it's, like Ethan said, it's the comment section. So many of those people you see in there aren't even real people. They're bots. It gives people permission to be their worst self. Mm-hmm. And speaking of people who are their worst selves, let's talk about ICE. Now, it's worth noting that one of the first things that drew Trump's ire against Pope Leo was the pontiff's criticism of the administration's immigration crackdown, which brings us, of course, to this week in ICE and DHS. And it's easy to see what the Pope was talking about with stories like this. So Marie-Therese Ros-Mahé is 86 years old. She was arrested in her nightgown at her late husband's Alabama home and thrown into federal immigration detention. She moved 4,000 miles from Brittany, France to Alabama to reunite with and marry a former U.S. Army captain she had fallen in love with when he was stationed there in the 1950s. And the circumstances suggest she was tipped off to ICE by her late husband's son, a retired state trooper. 2 days after a court order froze the estate's asset she's entitled to half of. The French government had to intervene to get her released. Weaponized immigration enforcement as a tool in an inheritance dispute. That's pretty bleak, but there's a small bit of accountability for these thugs. Up in Minnesota, a Hennepin County prosecutor charged an ICE agent with felony assault after he allegedly pointed his service weapon into another vehicle during a road rage incident on a Minneapolis highway. In an unmarked rental SUV with no indication it was law enforcement. The agent admitted drawing his firearm after the other vehicle had already rejoined normal traffic, and here's the detail that matters. If convicted, he would not be eligible for a presidential pardon because the charges are state, not federal. Gabby, they told us they were going after the worst of the worst. Did you think that included French grannies and nightgowns?
I mean, what was the pattern on the nightgown? Was it a particularly egregious nightgown?
It was really a moral pattern. It offended everybody. Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's not Paisley, I guess she's entitled to some human dignity. No, it's disgusting, and we've created conditions where you can, if you have anybody who's vulnerable, if you have someone who's spoken out against this regime, if you have somebody who has questionable status, they've created this situation. And now, I don't know, I think that the Minnesota ruling with the state charges, if I can just bring it back to the point I was state government has never been more important. Everybody wants to focus on federal because that's where the flurry is right now. And I think it is important to focus on federal. But what can we do as a state? And I don't see in Indiana with Todd Rokita or, our current legislator, I don't see accountability coming, but that is the president can only pardon federal charges. And I think that, to me, that's the point that is most important to highlight in all of this, because every week I really struggle with getting too overwhelmed with, the shock doctrine, the flurry of horrific stories. I catch myself driving sometimes and just thinking about like the kids, like the detention centers that are in Indiana, and thinking about the families. Like I hold my son who's 2 years old and look at him and think like, I get to be with him right now. No one is ripping him from my arms. No one is separating us by thousands of miles or forcing us to either be separated or to leave together. And I have to focus on policy. I have to focus on the way forward, because I feel too hard, and it becomes paralyzing to try to I don't know. I look at it and I try to focus on the fact that justice was able to be pursued because of state officials and state charges and state police forces. And that's what I try to take away from it.
So, Ethan, look, I mean, I guess this road rage charge is something, but let's be honest. One, will this guy actually face real consequences? And two, where are the charges for the agents who murdered Renee Good and Alex Preddy?
It's exactly what everybody's thinking whenever they see stories like this. Certainly what I was thinking. And the thing is, like, they have made it very, very difficult for state prosecutors to do this kind of thing with federal agents. And even if you were in a cooperative environment, right? Even if you were in an environment that was more interested in actual law and real order than they were in egregious anti-immigrant terrorism type activities, like agents who feel empowered to take men out of their houses in their underwear without warrants, or pull over cars they're fighting with and shove their guns in the windows. But again, and I as much as I kind of hate to paraphrase Sun Tzu in this, never interrupt your opponent when he's in the middle of making a mistake. Like, very little has galvanized everyday people like the threat of federal agents being unleashed in our neighborhoods and in our streets, pointing their guns at our neighbors, at our families, at our kids. And it helps break down this narrative of us and them, and makes it realize it's anybody that they want. And it will be your family and your kids. It will be your cousins and your daughter's school children, her schoolmates. That's who this affects, and that's who it will continue to affect. Our federal system isn't perfect, but state power to push back and leverage against national power, like Gabrianna was saying, it's really important. And it's another piece of why getting real representatives in the state house is so important in times like this.
So there's an Indiana ICE-related story this week, too. A federal judge issued a preliminary injunction blocking the Trump administration from pressuring Apple and Facebook to suppress an ICE tracking app built by a Brown County man named Mark Hodges. The judge found that former Attorney General Pam Bondi and former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem didn't request removal, they demanded it, using what the court called thinly veiled threats of prosecution to coerce platforms into censoring constitutionally protected speech. The First Amendment explicitly protects the right to observe and record law enforcement in public. The government's argument that these apps endanger agents is the same logic used to justify suppressing any accountability journalism. A win for the First Amendment and a win for a Hoosier. Ethan, this guy is a real Hoosier hero, isn't he? And this seems like a pretty cut and dry First Amendment case, doesn't it?
I would strongly agree, and it really resonates again with the conservative spirit. Like, I was raised on Ruby Ridges in Waco, Texas. Like, the stories of the danger of unchecked federal power, because we know that at the bottom, state power is the ability to inflict violence, right? And that's whether that's being used to protect the innocent or whether that's being used to oppress the innocent. At bottom, that's what we're talking about when we talk about law enforcement ability. And there is a super high standard that must be held accountable to. We give enormous amounts of power to the state. Even say the state has too much power. 30 years ago, enormous amounts of power in the hands of the police, in the hands of federal agents. And that power comes with the highest level of scrutiny, accountability, and responsibility. And like every good doctor, like every good sanitation worker, like every good federal agent, they expect to be held to that level. They expect to be held to that standard. And those who don't, that's why we have to have such high standards.
Every good doctor, like Trump, right? Gabby, what concerns me almost as much as the government's behavior here is how quickly these tech platforms just rolled over. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I don't expect people who are in the same financial class as them to have that level of integrity. I mean, we have how many studies showing that the amount of wealth and power you have does diminish your capabilities for empathy. I don't know. I don't expect them to be the ones acting morally. No precedent they've ever set has made me expect that. Tech companies build algorithms to exploit the most baser instincts that we have. So I don't know. I think that we need to hold them accountable as consumers, even though I struggle with putting too much responsibility on consumers. I don't want the working class, not just consumers, but it ends up falling to the working class and the most vulnerable. And so I think that that's another thing that when we do get power back, we need to, the first thing we need to do is regulate these unchecked industries. And that's why we need more working class representation who don't have interests that will be threatened by regulation. Mm-hmm. I think that our population, at large, has been conditioned to see regulation as the way conservatives try to use regulation, who I can marry, who I can how I can spend my money, what bathroom I can use. We see regulation as an infringement of rights, but what it really should be used for is protection for people who don't have wealth, status, power to protect them.
Yeah, 100%. And, put a pin in that. We're gonna talk about this entire dynamic here in a little bit, but for right now, I want to move on and talk about our next story. So, we mentioned Pam Bondi, right? Let's stay on that thread. The former attorney general, who apparently had time to threaten a guy in Brown County over an app, could not find the time to show up to a congressional subpoena on Tuesday. The subpoena stems from her handling of the Epstein files release, where, in what I can only describe as a remarkable inversion of the stated purpose of the transparency law, victims' names were left exposed while powerful figures' names were redacted. Trump fired her on April 2nd, conveniently rendering her a private citizen just as congressional pressure over the Epstein files was peaking. House Oversight says contempt proceedings are next, though with Republicans holding the majority. Whether that goes anywhere is another question entirely. And speaking of the Epstein files, did you guys see this piece out of New Mexico? Alyssa Valdez Rodriguez, writing at The Pugilist on Substack, another great subscribe. Go over there and subscribe to her. She's been doing some of the most dogged Epstein investigative reporting out there. The short version is this, and even this is kind of a convoluted mess, so try and stick with me here. So the governor at the time who sold Epstein the Zorro Ranch property, his New Mexico compound where survivors say he abused, and maybe worse, dozens of victims, in 1993, introduced him to the man who became Epstein's personal power of attorney and then became the United States attorney for the District of New Mexico. The governor's son later served as state attorney general for 7 years, took Epstein money for 2 decades through shell companies, and never opened an investigation. The company that paid New Mexico's Democratic governors to look the other way employed Ivanka Trump before she joined her father's organization. That company was later acquired by Brookfield Asset Management, a Canadian investment firm now managing over $1 trillion in assets, which within days bailed out Jared Kushner's financially underwater Manhattan skyscraper to the tune of over $1 billion, using a fund backed by Qatari sovereign wealth, while Kushner held American Middle East Policy Authority. Brookfield stonewalled a Senate investigation into whether those two things were connected, and today, Brookfield is Donald Trump's partner in an $80 billion nuclear infrastructure deal. That's a lot. Now, Gabby, the author of that piece, calls this Epstein class not a conspiracy, not a single political party, but a self-reinforcing network where everyone who took the money became a node. The nodes protect the network because the network protects them. How do you even begin to break something like that apart?
Yeah, I don't know.
Nice one, Scott.
just a small question, you know.
Yeah, just real quick, solve that. Just, no, like, what do you do? And what do you do with a completely, like, corrupt isn't even the word, a compromised Department of Justice, like, complicit Department of Justice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the Pam Bondi thing, like, is she being removed because of her incompetence, or is she being removed to protect her and to replace her with someone who has a lesser understanding during all of these hearings so that they can actually claim ignorance? It's bordering on conspiratorial, but we are living in a conspiracy. The facts you just laid out, they defy logic. It sounds like writing for an overly convoluted kind of bad mystery book. Like,
That's right.
And how is the average person supposed to follow this? Like, it's frustrating.
It makes you feel like you're wearing the tinfoil hat, like you got the bulletin board with all the pins and the string. And, you know, Ethan, I was going to ask, and Gabrianna brought it up. It definitely seems like, you know, this Bondi dismissal is framed as a firing, like, oh, she wasn't doing a good enough job prosecuting Trump's enemies or whatever. More like seems like this is part of the cover-up, like she knows too much, it's time to send her on her way and let this thing sort of slowly disappear. I don't intend to quit talking about it. I don't know about you.
One of the few unchallenged levers in this political conversation is the reality that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to every level of power in our government, and especially his decades-long friendship with Donald Trump. They're partying together, they're being photographed together, them like praising one another, the birthday note. It is the corrosive fluid sitting inside this failing vessel that is the Trump administration. And getting rid of Bondi, certainly I see as a means of trying to keep the ship going a little longer, because obviously the last time she was in front of Congress did not go well for her or the administration. The Dow is at 50,000 points really became a meme par excellence among everyone. I mean, even the right-wing commentators were like, that was super embarrassing. And even Republicans in Congress and in the U.S. Senate were none too pleased, because they know that this is a losing issue, because actually people on the main really care about what is done to children. We want to be like, I get really frustrated whenever I see these empty barbs thrown at people on the right who are just like, well, you're protecting pedophiles, you're protecting, MAGA, and you're protecting, Trump stuff. This is an easy one to build bridges over, guys. Mm-hmm. This is an easy one to pull people in over, because it can't be overstated. What we're seeing when we open our phones, when we turn on our feeds, and what people on the right are seeing couldn't be more different. Overwhelmingly, their news sources intentionally try to keep this kind of information from them. So let it not be our first instinct to pull out daggers and be like, you want kids to get hurt, and rather be like, do you realize how these people are all in a vast conspiracy to empower the worst men you know to do the worst things you've ever heard of? Because it's really complicated, all the nodes, but saying these are the most powerful, richest people who have ever lived, and they are all friends with each other and are working hard to make sure they can do whatever they want without people being able to stop them. But we can stop them.
Yeah, and it goes to show, like, it's not just Trump and Republicans in New Mexico. It was Democrats. It's a big club, and we ain't in it, right?
That's
and
right.
I think we can all agree on that. And if anybody's implicated in that, hang them all up. I don't care what letter you got in front of your name.
Right.
Let's move on and talk about some more stuff at the DOJ. And, Pam Bondi might be gone, but the fuckery there continues apace. And 3 stories this week that together paint a pretty complete picture of what Todd Blanche is now running over there. First, 6 immigration judges were fired this week, including 2 who had ruled against the Trump administration in deportation cases involving pro-Palestinian students. One of them, Rupal Patel, found out she was being fired by email mid-hearing and had to notify her courtroom before being walked out. The DOJ framed these firings as impartiality enforcement. Patel called it what it is, a deliberate effort to reshape the immigration bench to match the administration's political agenda. Less experienced judges, faster case pressure, shrinking room for due process. Now, second, the lead prosecutor in the DOJ's investigation of former CIA Director John Brennan was removed after telling Justice Department officials she didn't think the evidence supported criminal charges. The DOJ called it a routine reassignment. It is not a routine reassignment. It follows a clear pattern. Trump previously forced out a Virginia U.S. attorney who declined to charge former FBI directors Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe, and his replacement, Lindsay Halligan, secured indictments a judge then threw out because she had been unlawfully appointed. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche has said Trump has, quote, the right and duty to direct investigations against people he has issues with, a statement that would have ended careers in any prior administration. And third, the Justice Department asked a federal appeals court this week to erase, not just commute, but erase the seditious conspiracy convictions of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers leaders who organized January 6th, wiping the criminal records entirely. The motion was signed by U.S. Attorney and sentient box of wine Jeanine Pirro, who framed it as a routine prosecutorial discretion call in the interests of justice. Yes, the interests of justice for people who tried to overthrow the government. Ethan, this right here is what modern fascism looks like, right? It's not tanks in the streets. It's a weaponized justice system.
And it is exactly the thing to tell a rising left-leaning populist movement that they are 100% right and we need to restructure everything to do with our power structures. The thing is, and I want to be really clear about this, this is not something that Donald Trump has invented. He's merely pushing the pedal down on a whole bunch of areas where the federal government has been allowed to overreach, allowed to express presidential preference over the rule of law. And it's just in its most egregious form. And we have to recognize that the American political class has empowered this kind of unchecked abuse of power for many, many decades. And it's how we got here. You don't go from a stable people first democracy to this kind of authoritarian fascism in one election. And we need to be really clear on that, so that what we do starting in 2026 isn't just like, man, didn't you miss George W. Bush? It's like, no, I do not miss George W. Bush. Appreciate the memes, but I do not miss George W. Bush. I do not miss the Obama administration's expansion of the drone program and his targeting more whistleblowers and going after journalists than any president before him. I do not appreciate these things, and I recognize them as the corrosive impact of privilege and an abuse of authority that it is. And if we're going to turn and build something better that actually puts the everyday person first, that actually empowers the working class, and that holds the rich and powerful accountable, let's not be nostalgic for what never was, and let's build something that actually lifts all boats in America.
100%. I always like to say that Trump is not the disease. He is a symptom. This has been going on for a long time. Our executives have not faced accountability when they've done wrong. Nixon basically got to just walk away scot-free. Reagan committed treason, got away with it. It got covered up by George H.W. Bush. His kitty, George W., also committed war crimes. Obama, like you said, also committed war crimes. There needs to be a reckoning. It is not partisan. It goes all the way to the top, both sides. Like we said, big club, you ain't in it. Gabrianna. There's a lot packed in there, I guess, with all those three stories. As someone who, enjoys democracy, what do you find the most offensive?
God. I mean, just to, I don't know, to Ethan's point, like not being nostalgic for what never was, that is it's just so good. No, and I don't know, I think that a lot of times the more conservative, or the people who vote more conservative that I know, they make criticisms about like this corruption. And I remember early on in the Trump presidency with all the executive orders, when I would just pose the question, like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about the trampling of the Constitution and the complete disregard for checks and balances? And the fact that he exposed that those checks and balances are just words. They're not real. They're an audit with no enforcement.
Parchment barriers, I believe James Madison called them 250 years ago. Yeah.
And for me, when I would bring that up, they would point out, there's a cat. They would point out like, oh, well, this president did this, like this president suspended these norms, like in this, and throw out some super obscure talking point that they got from a podcast. Not anything negative about podcasts, but no, like
podcasters, am I right?
They would pull out these super niche examples, and I think to validate like the points that Ethan made, when they point out corruption, when they are like, oh, well, Democrats do it too. Yes, they do. That is why we're here, because we can't continue to just let it happen. We have to send people in who are not bought and paid for by the same people pulling the strings. I mean, I'll look at campaign donors to some of these candidates. They overlap. It's not partisan. A lot of these issues aren't partisan. And that's why when we are screaming from our homes at Congress to please do something, the Senate to please do something, just do your job, make something happen. They're not doing it. We can't even agree on like a trading stocks and like a ban on trading stocks and a ban on, like, we can't agree on ethics. And I don't think that's us. When I say we, I mean that very loosely, because it's not the electorate. That's something that is a bipartisan issue. Term limits, that is a bipartisan issue. And I think that in Indiana specifically, people are far less partisan than they are values-based. And I think that we need to speak to those values, the values of integrity, of ethics, of accountability. And that, I mean, it's so far removed from the actions that you just referenced. It's ridiculous.
And we can call it out when either side does it, because we're not in a cult. Let's move on to our next story here, and move up from the prosecutors at the DOJ to judges. And it was a bit of a mixed bag in the courts this week. Let's start with the wins first. The pride flag is going back up at the Stonewall National Monument. LGBTQ plus groups sued after the federal government removed it in February, and the government settled. The National Park Service must reinstall the flag within 7 days and cannot remove it except for maintenance. The case is dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot relitigate it. Second, A federal judge dismissed Trump's $10 billion defamation suit against the Wall Street Journal over its reporting on an alleged birthday letter Trump sent Jeffrey Epstein. I believe Ethan mentioned that a little bit ago. The judge ruled Trump fell nowhere near the actual malice standard required. The journal's defense is straightforward. The letter is real, publicly available, and confirmed by documents Trump himself signed into law. This is the second major defamation suit Trump has lost at the dismissal stage, following a judge's scathing rejection of his $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times. Now, for the loss, a divided D.C. Circuit panel blocked Judge James Boasberg's criminal contempt inquiry into Trump officials, including Kristi Noem, for defying his order to halt deportation flights to El Salvador. The two-judge majority, both Trump appointees, ruled Boasberg overstepped. The Biden-appointed dissenter warned the ruling could undermine federal court authority for generations. The ACLU says it's asking the full D.C. Circuit to take up the case. Gabrianna, I want to focus on the first two for a moment, the Stonewall flag, the Wall Street Journal defamation dismissal. These are small, symbolic wins, but in a week with a lot of bad news out of the courts, how important is it to hold on to those?
Oh, it's vitally important. I mean, it's like searching for any kind of win in this climate. And just, I think it's a good reminder that even though it feels like we have lost everything that was important, that we feel like we are in a position that we're powerless, that we are not, and that there are some institutions that are still in place that are working the way they should. I really try to focus on the wins and to not see them as like done, because like as a final win, it just shows, I mean, sometimes those wins show vulnerability that when we have the opportunity, we need to put stronger protections in so that we shouldn't, getting the pride flag put back up shouldn't have been in question to begin with. We need to codify certain rights. We need to not, I mean, when people are in survival mode and our tax dollars are paying for endless wars and bombing brown children, I don't think any of us want to have to fight over a flag. And that's not minimizing, like that should never have been on the table. Mm-hmm. Like it is, we shouldn't have to be fighting these symbolic victories. This should be a done deal that LGBTQ protections are human rights. And to get, I don't know, the quicker we can get to that point, the more of a victory it is for me.
Yeah. So, Ethan, sorry, you got to tackle the bad news here. Noem and company were clearly in contempt. That's not even really seriously disputed. But we got instead was Trump-appointed judges handing the administration effective impunity. The symbolic wins are nice, but this is the one that's real. What do we do when the courts stop being a check on executive power?
Excellent question, Scott. And obviously, this did not happen by accident. This is decades of careful planning and placement by the conservative movement to get judges, get lawyers into the courts, get conservative justices in place to be promoted into these positions. And with Project 2025, they're triggering it all to pack the courts as much as possible here with people who are going to reshape law in the country. And so the only antidote for this is to sweep the lawmakers. And I'm talking about your local state houses. I'm talking about Congress. I'm talking about the Senate, where, yes, justices interpret the law, but what we, the people, have direct influence over is who writes the laws and what laws get put on the books. For instance, how judges get appointed. For instance, oversight over courts. Like, we have seen the gross abuse of federal power, of the executive branch, to create all kinds of imbalance and injustice, to enrich billionaires, to empower polluters, to empower foreign companies and foreign nations to have undue access to our markets and to our real estate. And what we can do is we can react with the power of lawmaking to protect Americans, to protect our neighbors who live in our neighborhoods, who are actually investing in, I'm talking about immigrants, who are actually working for the people. That is what we have to do, because we have direct power over our state houses. We have direct power over Congress and over the Senate. And so but we're only going to do that. It's not enough just to do that. We have to organize. We have to organize like they did when they won the weekend. We have to organize like they did when women won the vote, when they organized and won for civil rights. Like this, because the ability, when we saw 8 million people come out for No Kings this last time, we're going to see more next time. When people say like, it's not doing anything, you're wrong. It's raising a national profile of people saying they do not accept what's going on right now. And it creates a place for people to meet one another in a place where society has been degraded, where natural meeting spaces don't exist as much as they did at the start of the century. So we have to build movements. We have to organize with one another in solidarity. I know I've seen people out on the northern end of the state showing up on the picket lines with NIPSCO, and you know, I've got MPP down here in Washington County, where they won their union 2 years ago and are still negotiating for a contract. There's lots and lots of places where we can realize the fight is here, realize it's our fight, and then also carry it to the polls to sweep lawmaking positions so we can do something to defang and break the power of the Epstein class.
Yeah, let's move up. We're talking about the courts. Let's move up to the top court and talk about Justice Clarence Thomas, who this week gave an hour-long speech at the University of Texas, ostensibly honoring the Declaration of Independence's 250th anniversary, and used it to declare that progressivism and American founding ideals cannot coexist. Now, Thomas opened with a genuinely moving tribute to the Declaration's ideals and his grandparents' sacrifices, and then spent 50 minutes making stuff up. He blamed progressivism for Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, and Mao, with no supporting evidence and considerable contradictory evidence. He blamed Woodrow Wilson for importing German authoritarianism into American politics, selectively quoting a Wilson paper that, when you read the full passage, argues the opposite. He also conveniently forgot that Wilson went to war with German autocracy in 1917, that fascism was explicitly anti-socialist, that Hitler drew direct inspiration from American Jim Crow and Native American removal policies, and that the first progressive president wasn't Wilson, it was Theodore Roosevelt. But here's the part that should really disqualify a person from ever being taken seriously again. This speech was introduced by Harlan Crow, the billionaire mega donor who spent 2 decades lavishing Thomas with undisclosed luxury gifts. And Thomas, in that same speech, warned about officials who succumb to the enchanting siren songs of flattery. Ethan, I cannot tell if he has no self-awareness or simply no shame.
The conceit that comes along with long stints of unchecked and uninterrogated power. The people around Justice Clarence Thomas and the people that he is willing to listen to clearly are the people that tell him what he wants to hear, like Harlan Crow. It is the danger that always presents itself to people in authority when they insulate themselves from genuinely having to deal with other opinions. I mean, and of course, one of my favorite C.S. Lewis quotes is that we are morally resolving beings. Every choice we make is actually funneling us in a direction. And it's not that you are locked on a track you can't get out of, but your choices get narrower each resolving moral choice that you make, making you a kind of person, of which to escape would require something miraculous. Clarence Thomas has been in a long moral resolution in a certain ideological direction, and seeing him become more extreme is not surprising to anybody that studies or has been part of powerful ideological movements like the conservative movement that I grew up in, where you watch people become more intensely who they are over time. And it's one more reason to seriously question lifelong judicial appointments. It's one more reason to really, really question whether we want that to continue to be part of our future and why it is so important to take back the legislature.
Gabrianna, mainstream media has largely ignored this story, but can you imagine the outcry if Ketanji Brown Jackson gave a similar speech about conservatism at UC Berkeley?
You mean a DEI speech? No, it's ridiculous. The double standard it's not something they're trying to hide. No, it's frustrating to be where we are. Yeah, I really, yeah, the fact that we they celebrate things being done on their end or minimize things being done on their end, that if it were turned the other way, like, I don't know, my one thing that people keep harkening back to is like, oh, well, if Obama did any one of the things that Trump is doing, or if Joe Biden had signed any executive orders with his auto pen about like the things that Trump has done, the right would be losing their mind. And I don't know. I think that, like Ethan keeps saying, it's reflective of the systemic issues, the lifelong appointments, the the things that we really need to go in and fix. And some of them are going to take time, but some of them don't have to take as long as we like to think that they would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you mentioned the double standard, and it's funny that he's attacking progressivism when like the fundamental premise of conservatism is a double standard. It is that the law there is one class of people who the law binds but does not protect, and another class of people who the law protects but does not bind.
Boom.
And Clarence Thomas certainly seems to be a member of that second group because his crimes are innumerable. Speaking of elite criminal impunity, let's move on. And Clarence Thomas' flagrant corruption is hardly an outlier. It's a feature of a system failing working people for decades. Is it any wonder we're seeing stories like these? OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's San Francisco home was targeted twice last weekend, a Molotov cocktail Friday morning, thankfully causing no damage and no injuries, and an apparent gunshot Sunday night. Again, no one was hurt. Now, also, a Kimberly-Clark warehouse employee in California allegedly set a fire that caused over $600 million in damage, then texted a coworker comparing himself to Luigi Mangione, framing it explicitly as class-based grievance, saying, "All you had to do was pay us enough money to live." He faces up to 10 years in federal prison. Now, that's a property tragedy. Here's a human tragedy. At another warehouse, this one an Amazon warehouse up in Troutdale, Oregon, a warehouse worker died on the job on April 6th, and employees allege his body went unattended for over an hour while operations continued around him. A supervisor allegedly told workers to just turn around and not look and get back to work. Speaking of Amazon, newly unredacted court documents reveal the company systematically punished independent sellers who dared charge less on competitor sites, stripping their access to the buy box and forcing prices up across the entire internet. Amazon now controls 56% of U.S. online retail spending. The company that built its brand on low prices is the reason your prices are high everywhere. And while all this is going on, the New York Times this week handed Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' wife, Lauren Sanchez, thousands of fawning words while her husband engaged in said monopoly behavior, laid off a third of the Washington Post newsroom, paid $40 million to flatter Melania Trump, and his warehouse workers are dying on the clock. Bezos promised to give away most of his fortune in 2022. He has since more than doubled it and given away less than 2%. But sure, let's talk about how happy Lauren is. Gabby, that Sanchez piece has some real Marie Antoinette vibes, doesn't it?
No, everyone I work with has been talking about this reflectively all week, and it is I don't know. I think the way that we view property damage can be a little bit frustrating. I mean, he's facing, is it life?
10 years for the guy who burned the warehouse.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's been, I don't know, there's a lot of things going on. Sometimes it's hard to keep all of them straight, but no, I think that paired with other warehouse fires, paired with the Sam Altman attacks, and a lot of people I see are also looping in the incident in Indianapolis with the drive-by and the data center message and everything. When, I don't know, to take these actions, people have to feel like there is absolutely no other recourse. People have to feel that there is nothing to lose. I mean, the warehouse fire, all you had to do is pay us enough to live. That, I mean, he posted that as he was doing it. How, at that point, you're not expecting that you're just going to get away with it. You are accepting that the consequences of that action are better than living in the system that has been built for you. And I think that's what I try to take away from it. To be to the point of desperation that consequences be damned, consequences are worth it. That is reflective of systemic failure, that if we don't change, it's not going to stop here. Yeah, to me, it's just, it's reflective of failure.
Well, and he compared himself explicitly to Luigi Mangione. For people who don't know, Mangione was accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare. He had some health problems, had some run-ins with the insurance industry, as one does as an American. And it's generally like Americans are like, they might not condone it, but they get it. And Ethan, that's where this thing's going, right? It's like, okay, y'all, the Epstein class can start paying your taxes, can start contributing to society so the rest of us can live a decent life, or the pitchforks and then the guillotines are going to come out.
Right. And any honest look at history says this is where it goes when you get massive wealth inequality built up. Right. And I mean, you can do centuries of a ruling aristocracy with serfs, but that doesn't end well for you either. It's not worth it. We can make a more fair and just society by concretely focusing on, is it just that you reap millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of money from the work of other people that get fractions, the tiniest possible fractions of what their labor is producing? Are you worth that? Is your hour worth that? Are your children so much more valuable than their children? Are your homes so much more valuable than their homes? And one of the true bangers out of the New Testament is in James 5, and it says, "Woe to you who are rich, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming upon you, because the cries of the laborers in your fields are rising up to the Lord of the Sabbath, whose wages you have kept back by fraud." And I think about that so many times when I'm reading headlines these days, where it's like, your profits, your 200 times the income of your lowest paid worker is a wage kept back by fraud. You don't disclose how much their labor is worth, and you refuse to give them what their labor is worth. And it is a fact that when people are faced with a growing tide, Indiana is now #1 in the country for foreclosures. We have to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Indiana, you need to be making $22.18 an hour, and the average wage is under like $18 an hour. There is only so far you can push people before the social contract, the agreement that if you do the right things, if you obey the rules, it will generally turn out all right for you, is seen to be breaking down. And one of the things we have to do, one of the reasons why I've decided to step up and run right now, is because there are concrete, immediate things we can do to provide relief to people who are struggling to pay rent, relief to people whose utilities are too high, and bring down those costs so that people can actually breathe. Because when people can't breathe, suddenly setting things on fire starts making sense. And if we want to avert that, we have to take action now.
Yeah, the minimum wage right now is less than the price of a pound of ground beef. These people treat us like we are ground meat. Now, there is an Indiana angle to all of this, and what happens when the very organizations that are supposed to be protecting workers are themselves abusive?
Mm-hmm.
The union representing the Indiana State Teachers Association staff, the professional staff organization, has filed NLRB charges alleging that ISTA management retaliated against union leaders who objected to an opaque internal restructuring plan. 3 PSO officers, including its president and vice president, were placed on administrative leave, with 2 facing termination, all while simply seeking information about the restructuring. So, a teachers union is accused of doing to its own staff exactly what PSO members spend their careers fighting against on behalf of Indiana's educators. Ethan, isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
Power corrupts. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I mean, we know that Indiana teachers have been truly pushed down over and over again over the last few decades. I mean, a union that doesn't have the power to strike is a union that's fangs have been taken away. And we have to recognize that whenever pay is so low for teachers in Indiana that here in Southern Indiana, the move for most teachers is just to jump across the river into the Louisville area. And if you have a master's degree, I have a friend who's a middle school teacher, moved over to a job in Louisville and started making $10,000 more a year instantly. That's the reality Indiana teachers are dealing with. And so again, like, you can't keep grinding people down and expect them to take it. And we need to recognize as communities, all injustice is rooted in an imbalance of power. And if we want to fix what's broken, the injustice that we see, we have to take power back. And that power exists with organizing and group action. Unions are already the best place to get that started because we already have the organization happening. We already have the looking left and right and realizing we're all on the same line here. But we can spread that to our communities. We're seeing with the NIPSCO lockout, like we're seeing with BP lockout, where you're seeing broad community support coming around these workers. It's just like, don't let it stop here. Let push for the next thing, because the injustice you see exists because of an imbalance of power, and fixing it means we have to take our power back.
Yes, support organized labor, but Gabby, does union boss behavior, like we just described, undermine the broader efforts of organized labor?
So yeah, that's something that I've had people bring up to me a lot, actually, is my campaign, the party at large, like we, support labor. But I've had people be like, yeah, I want to support labor, but I've been in unions where, the power did corrupt. Mm-hmm. And they've had to deal with the consequences, like, what we're seeing here. And I guess what I try to bring it back to is, if it is truly a democratized workplace, then you should have a way to hold those power structures to account. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, just because we support it doesn't mean it's perfect. Just because it is a better way of doing things doesn't mean that it's not able to be corrupted. And I think I see people make these criticisms, and I validate the criticisms, but that because it can be corrupted, that doesn't mean that we throw the whole thing out. It's just a reason to continue to work harder. And, from a place of state legislation, what can we do to give people, to make sure that people have recourse in these situations? But yeah, I just don't want people to have more ammunition against democratized workplaces. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a betrayal. It's even worse, I think, when union leadership does this, because that's some class traitor shit. You expect this kind of behavior from ownership, from the boss. When union bosses do it, you're in danger of setting back the whole movement with crap like this. It's incredibly frustrating. So, let's go back across the pond. And some of you may remember that last week on this very show, we were talking about the Hungarian election. And at that time, voting was going on. But by Sunday afternoon, we had our answer. And Viktor Orbán's 16-year rule ended in a landslide, with opposition leader Peter Magyar's party projected to win a supermajority in parliament. And this is equally a defeat for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, both of whom invested extraordinary political capital in Orbán's re-election and got nothing for it. Magyar ran not as a leftist, but as a conservative who defected from Orbán's inner circle. His victory crowds waved EU flags alongside Hungarian ones. And here's why this matters beyond Hungary. Orbán's real export was the illiberal governing model now being replicated in Washington. His fall is not just a local story. Upcoming elections in France, Italy, Poland, and Spain become the next step, the next test, rather, of whether MAGA-aligned populism can survive without its flagship example. Gabrianna, in 2016, the Brexit vote in the UK sort of presaged Trump's win here in the US. Is Orbán's loss a sign that right-wing authoritarian populism is on the way out here as well?
I mean, I certainly hope so. I kind of touching back to what I said earlier, like, our glorious missteps on the national stage, our embarrassing performance from our president and the people that he's having conduct like foreign relations, they're having an effect globally. And I hope that this is evidence that, because of seeing authoritarianism fail on a US size scale, I really hope that it does set an example going forward in these future elections. And I just really want to see a global swing left toward true, like, liberal democracy. And I do hope that this is indicative of a larger swing.
Yeah, but winning the election, getting the guy out of power is not sufficient, right, Ethan? I mean, Magyar is vowing to dismantle the corrupt criminal organization Orbán erected in Hungary. That's what we need to do here. What does that look like? Having a criminal justice system that actually goes after criminals, and I don't mean people,
and capitalizing on the growing sense people are getting screwed, and they're getting screwed by the rich and powerful. People know that. It's part of why Viktor Orbán lost, because his corruption became so well known and so visible, and the stagflation in the economy, the way everyday people were being hurt by his regressive policies. If he can carry that momentum, that's how he's going to make those big structural changes as Bonhoeffer said, that we don't just lift the wheel off of people that are run over by injustice. We drive a spoke through the wheel and break the dang thing. That's what we have to do. And to do that, you have to carry the will, the excitement, the anger of people into these big changes. And whenever I'm talking to people in my district, whenever I see these conversations happening, we have to help people connect the dots to see that, like I mentioned MPP in Campbellsburg, Indiana earlier. It is a small manufacturing company that has been the lifeblood of Campbellsburg, Indiana for decades. I talked to women who retired from there, who worked the lathe, who worked in the factory for 40 years. It's owned by a New York private equity company now, and they own a number of energy concerns up and down Pennsylvania and Indiana, and they have fought them for over a year on a contract after initially fighting and suing them over the union. And they are trying so hard to get this $1 billion portfolio up so they can sell it to somebody even bigger than them. So they can sell it to somebody even bigger than them. So it can make money on rent, on debt, on the labor of these people in Campbellsburg, Indiana, that will never see a dime of it. And most of the Washington County doesn't really understand what's happening. District 47 doesn't really understand what's happening. Helping people see that you are in a fight against the wealthiest, most organized class of people to ever exist in the world, who can perform transactions and get deals done in fractions of a second that decide the fate of your town. Helping people see that and helping them mobilize and carry their anger, carry their passion, and know who they're really fighting against, because people know they're getting screwed. Helping them see who's actually doing it is what we have to do as candidates, and then what we have to do as elected officials.
Right, because the way it's treated is, hey, here's these private equity guys from New York coming in, scooping up your company, making your life worse. Look, they're in New York. New York elects Democrats. It's Democrats' problem. And we've got to get beyond that kind of simplistic thinking.
Yes.
Let's come back here stateside. You know, there were elections in Hungary last weekend. Well, we had elections this week, at least a special election in New Jersey, where progressive Analilia Mejia won the 11th district special election on a platform of abolishing ICE, Medicare for all, and taking direct aim at billionaires' stranglehold on the economy. AIPAC spent heavily to stop her and ended up elevating her instead. Oops. But I want to take a look at an important upcoming election, and that is the California gubernatorial race and what just happened to one of its leading contenders. Eric Swalwell, who had been a top-tier candidate for governor leading in the polls, announced he is leaving Congress after sexual misconduct allegations surfaced, and it's worth noting that this story was not broken by the New York Times or the Washington Post or the San Francisco Chronicle, but by social media influencer Mrs. Frazzled, who published what was apparently a widely known secret in political circles that traditional media refused to touch. The allegations are serious and gross. A former staffer says Swalwell raped her on 2 separate occasions while she was too intoxicated to consent. 3 other women allege unsolicited nude photos and explicit messages. Swalwell denies the assault allegations, but admits to, quote, mistakes in judgment. There's probably more where this came from. Now, joining him in exiting Congress this week is Texas Republican Tony Gonzalez, who acknowledged an affair with a staffer who later died by self-immolation. And this guy lingered in Congress until Republicans realized they could force him out simultaneously with Swalwell to keep the House's partisan balance intact. Ethan, now Democrats moved pretty swiftly to drive Swalwell out. His own campaign chair resigned and called on him to step down. Colleagues on both sides were plotting expulsion. Republicans, on the other hand, let Gonzalez linger until they could use him as a bargaining chip to get rid of Swalwell. What does that tell you about the difference between the two parties?
And I mean, we've seen this before. This is not the first time we've seen the Democratic Party take immediate action whenever allegations come to light. And the impulse of the conservative movement to protect men, to protect important men, to protect men of a certain profile is well documented, especially, I mean, Gabrianna, I know you said you have a background in behavioral psychology. Like if you look at especially conservative religious movements, the history of protecting men who engage in predatory behavior because they're just important, and we need to be able to forgive, and we need to be able to see their side instead of protecting women, instead of protecting girls, has a long and deeply troubled history. And progressives are by no means is exempt from it, as we saw recently with Cesar Chavez in California, where again we saw overnight statues are taken down, whenever it came to light that he had engaged in grooming and abusing and raping children, as well as his adult peers. All I can say about Swalwell is good riddance. Don't let the door hit you. Every single man who engages in this kind of behavior needs to consider self-immolation, because this, the only way this ends is if the consequences become far more terrifying than the payoff. Like the cycle where 1 in 3 women is abused or has been abused or harmed by an intimate partner is only broken when we absolutely drive these men out of social life.
So, Gabrianna, now listen, that's all well and good to point out the differences in how the two parties handled this, but these allegations were apparently a widely whispered secret in Democratic circles for years, which suggests that there were likely plenty of powerful Democrats who knew exactly what was going on and only called for his ouster once Mrs. Frazzled made it impossible to look away. How much credit do Democrats really deserve here?
So, yeah. I'm trying to use my words.
Yeah.
So 2 things. One, he stepped down. I don't know what pressure was applied by parties at large. I think that public humiliation in situations like this is a great tool. I think that at large we do have a better track record than our Republican counterparts, but at that same time, it is still, I think, what I see more often than not in these whispered, not that I'm privy to whispered conversations of horrific systemic abuse or actions like this, but when there are people in the party who it's this person has a reputation for being this kind of way, this person acts like this when they're drinking, or this person, maybe don't associate with them because we don't have proof, but these allegations were made, because that does happen. I think that it only becomes actionable when it's public. And that's the issue that I have with it. Oftentimes I feel that if I can get a little critical of the party, I see...
we want that here.
I see us running on these values that I obviously align with very strongly. And then when it comes to act on those values, it's often a question of what we can get away with. And we are more afraid, and I'm going to say they, not we. They're more afraid of being seen to be contradicting those values than they are of the actual harm that's done when people act like this. And also, if I can just, that primary race, the way California's gubernatorial race is set up, people have been calling for other candidates to drop out to try to consolidate votes for the perceived frontrunners. And then look how that's turned out. I think that in the national sphere, there's been a lot of talk about how candidates should be handling that race, about sacrificing their shot at the race, sacrificing their campaign for the greater good. And I think from a strategy standpoint, that is always a conversation that's worth having. But I think that if you are unsure, you should, where would we be if another candidate who was pressured to step out of the race or drop out had done so, and now with him in the position he's in, I mean, it just, I don't know. It just makes me question. I don't have like some provincial point that I'm leading up to. It's just something as I'm learning more and more about partisan politics, about like state politics, there are often moves that the establishment wants us to make for the sake of strategy without knowledge of what's going to happen in the future. And so it's just something to think about going forward.
Indeed. I like the jungle primary kind of thing that they do out there in California. It does have its drawbacks. I'd like to see the top 4 move on to the general and then ranked choice voting, but that's a long way off. We got to win first. Let's talk about elections here at home. Okay, we've got our own primary coming up on May 5th. This week, a federal judge blocked Indiana's ban on student IDs for voter identification, restoring access for an estimated 40,000 students in time for the midterms. The court found the state eliminated a form of ID that had worked without incident for nearly 2 decades while producing zero evidence of fraud tied to student IDs. Meanwhile, in Senate District 38, Terre Haute attorney Jim Bopp, a close ally of President Trump and Governor Braun, and one of the most consequential far-right political actors of the last 50 years, tried to kick Republican Alexandra Wilson off the May 5th ballot over a 2010 criminal charge that was pleaded down to a misdemeanor. The whole thing was in an effort to drag Trump-endorsed candidate Brenda Wilson to a primary victory over the incumbent senator there, Greg Good, who voted against the White House's redistricting push this past December. Worth noting, both of these rulings that affect the elections came down a week after early voting in Indiana had already begun. Now, also along the lines of this primary here, the governor endorsed 3 House Republicans this week who voted against redistricting, directly contradicting his own December threat that opposing redistricting would carry political consequences. In the same breath, he endorsed 7 primary challengers, targeting Senate Republicans who voted against redistricting. So, Braun is punishing Senate members for the same vote he's rewarding House members for and hoping nobody notices. If Mike Braun is consistent about one thing, it's in being inconsistent. Gabby, good news on those court rulings, right?
Oh, absolutely. Also, if I can just speak a little bit to the endorsement process with the results of the redistricting, my district specifically is dealing with that. My opponent, Linda Rogers, is being primaried by a candidate who was handpicked and has been running. He's received a Trump endorsement, and he received that Trump endorsement the same day that Trump made that post about wiping an entire civilization off the face of the earth. So the timing is just stunning. But I don't know. This is purely speculation, but I kind of see it as with Braun's endorsements, the House is far more vulnerable to having the supermajority broken. So I think the incumbent typically stands a better chance than an incoming challenger. So I see it as being strategic. I see it as he wants to keep power in the House because he sees what's going on. He sees how many people have filed to run and how much momentum some of these races have built up. And then in the Senate has a farther way to go before the supermajority is broken. Not to say that it can't be, but it is a lot more difficult. Mm-hmm. And the Senate has a reputation for being more moderate than the more radical and more reactionary House. And so I think that they want more ideologically aligned candidates in the Senate, people who are going to vote along those like more extremist party lines than trying to listen more to their voters as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you give Governor Braun far too much credit in strategic thinking. I think he's just a flip-flopper who will do anything for political expediency. Ethan, how does he manage to sit up straight at that big desk without a spine?
Oh man, and it's been. I mean, like obviously, all these threats were being made during the redistricting fight. All this guarantee obstruction should you buck the party line. And the Terre Haute case is very interesting to me because I was actually born and raised in Terre Haute, lived there until I was 20 years old. Jim Bop is a very known quantity to me and my family. Like, so watching the stories come out of Terre Haute has been super fun. And it is you talk about these presidential endorsements. My opponent, Gary Byrne, got a shout out, tragically identified as representing the 47th congressional district in that, as opposed to the 47th state Senate district. Little clues is that the prez did in fact write these. But yes. Governor Braun not having a plan besides stumbling in from one thing to the next is pretty evident on all policy issues, whether it's completely ignoring the people to the district just to the west of me, where they're pushing through the mid-state corridor that has 83% opposition in the counties where it's slated to be built. Like, overwhelmingly, nobody, including in Braun's hometown, wants this new massive interstate built through their counties. And so him endorsing people, I kind of liken it as the least popular governor in the country. It's kind of, again, it's kind of like watching my opponent pick up an endorsement from the president as we get ready to fall into the worst energy crisis the world has ever seen, of which we shan't dig ourselves out in 2 years at least. It's once again, I've referenced Sun Tzu once this time, and I'll reference it one more time. Never interrupt your opponent while they're in the middle of making a mistake. Endorse away, my good sir. We will make sure that the people of Indiana understand exactly what values that means and what it has done to their budgets, what it has done to the values of their homes, and what it means for the future of their kids. And if we want to change it, we've got real candidates that are going to fight for that and are going to use the swing of this year to make real progress in Indiana.
Let's move from Governor Braun to one of the other recurring villains that we talk about in Indiana state politics, and that's Secretary of State Diego Morales. Now, he is being torpedoed by members of his own party this week, including his predecessor, Connie Lawson, and the GOP's own election division co-counsel, who accuse him of nepotism, sloppy election administration, and spending public money on a $90,000 luxury SUV from a campaign donor. Now, the official responsible for issuing notary licenses couldn't even get his own staff properly notarized, forcing candidates to rush back to Indianapolis to refile paperwork in February. Both the Republican co-director and co-counsel of the Indiana Election Division are walking out the door immediately after the primary, a mass exodus that speaks louder than any letter of resignation ever could. Morales faces a convention fight in June against Knox County Clerk Dave Shelton. Gabrianna, is Morales even going to survive his own party's convention?
I mean, it doesn't look like it. He's just so widely negatively viewed, and I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of people gearing up for this Secretary of State race based on the assumption that the opponent will be Morales. And I think the focus has to be righting the wrongs that he has done. And I see some candidates doing that for sure. But yeah, sometimes it's fun to watch the Republicans eat themselves alive. I hope they really fight it out. I hope they really piss off a lot of people in their own camp. All the power to them.
Well, you get at something, and I this is where I wanted to go with this. The Republicans are having their own internal divisions, right? Democrats, of course, we are too. And Ethan, it seems to me that one candidate on our side has a plan for this office, and the other's entire message is, we got to get rid of Diego. Mm-hmm. Well, if Morales isn't the Republican nominee, is there even a message there?
It's a great question, and really speaks to running a campaign on an actual policy program and not just I'm different from the other guy, right? I mean, I even had an opportunity in my own campaign where my opponent, like said to a constituent, well, you should just vote for the other guy. And I've like caught on with like a bunch of people like, vote for the other guy. And I'm like, I'm not running on that. I'm running on creating a public registry for domestic offenders. Like I'm running on creating paid parental leave. I have policies that I'm pursuing. And so the Secretary of State race, very much the same situation. What are your actual policies? How are you actually going to improve access for voters? How are you going to update our way out of date system? And I agree. I've seen one candidate do that in a way that the other candidate has not. And it's important because no, I don't see Morales surviving this. I'm hopeful Beckwith won't survive it. These are profoundly unpopular people working for a profoundly unpopular governor. And everybody smells blood in the water headed into 2026 for the Republican Party. They have been mismanaging our state for 20 years, and we have the highest utilities in the Midwest. We're in the middle of a foreclosure crisis, and they have horrifically unpopular leaders. So yeah, we got to run on policy. We got to run on what we're actually going to do, not just like, I'm not the other guy.
Like we were talking about in Hungary with Magyar, it's more than just putting a new face on things. You have to dismantle the corrupt system. You have to have a plan. It can't just be vote for the other guy.
That's right.
So a couple sort of dangling ends here. We've got some leftovers, and let's close out with these couple of Indiana stories that didn't really fit neatly into our other categories, but are still too important to skip. This week, Governor Braun announced a $200 million investment to reopen Indiana's child care voucher program, which had been closed to new enrollees for over a year with nearly 35,400 children on the wait list. This money could pull about 14,000 kids off the wait list with priority for foster, kinship, special needs, and homeless kids. And that's genuinely good news, though about 21,000 kids will still remain on the wait list even if the full investment is approved. Also from the Braun desk, the governor announced a letter of intent with Eli Lilly to explore nuclear energy feasibility in Indiana. Wait a second. Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company, nuclear energy, I thought their business was making profit by gouging sick people, and now they're branching out into unproven small modular reactor technology with no clear timetable for actually building anything. A letter of intent to explore feasibility is a long way from a reactor, but it does raise an interesting question about where Lilly's priorities actually lie. And speaking of gouging sick people, Indiana's hospitals delivered over $717 million in care last year that went unpaid by insurers, with the Indiana Hospital Association estimating total unpaid care statewide likely exceeds $1.6 billion. Greene County General Hospital escalated this week by serving Anthem with a breach of contract notice, accusing the insurer of paying claims far below contractually required rates. The IHA's pointed question is the right one. Premiums keep rising, so where is this money actually going? Rural hospitals are most exposed, and the Hospital Association warns that Hoosier hospitals are approaching a breaking point. Ethan, on the child care voucher investment, right? This seems like the GOP arsonist setting a fire, claiming credit for putting it out, but the embers are in fact still burning. 21,000 kids remain on this wait list.
That's right. And start the thing about like a nurse sending somebody into cardiac arrest and then applying the paddles and being like, and they're kind of like, they're stable, but they're unconscious. Like, I saved them. It's like, you put them in cardiac arrest. The priorities of this administration, the priorities of the GOP have been about making Indiana a great place for business, ignoring the fact that most people have kids and can't raise them here and work. That most people move places where they have good health care, where there are good schools, and where there's support for raising kids. And Indiana has turned hard away from those things, legislative session after legislative session, while allowing utilities to pass their costs onto us, while allowing big conglomerates to snatch up single family homes, and while allowing this kind of thing, right? So whenever I hear these stories, I always turn back to, this is about an imbalance of power, and we only fix it by taking back our power. And we can only do that by organizing and by getting new legislatures into our legislature.
A great state for business, not necessarily a great state for people. Gabrianna, how broken is our healthcare system in this state when hospitals are closing, but Big Pharma has enough capital on hand to literally go nuclear?
No, yeah, I don't know. Healthcare is just so frustrating because, like, why are we putting dollar amounts on, like, saving people's lives? Also, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a choice, right?
It is a choice. And no, I worked briefly in admissions in a hospital for a pretty large healthcare system in my region. And so I have been the one sitting at the desk giving people their estimate before they choose whether or not, and that's the thing, it's scheduled and it's assumed like, okay, this is going to happen, and then people get there, they give their name, their insurance information, answer a bunch of pointless questions, and then they're given an estimate, and they've already wasted, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes in this part of the process. And then they're given an estimate for a procedure that they need to have done.
My firstborn child.
Yeah. No, I will be paying for my pregnancy for like until my son moves out. I have a complicated situation there though. I like had a high risk pregnancy and spent the first 2 trimesters uninsured. So like ridiculous amount of medical debt. And I just while I worked there, everybody that I asked about like on the administrative side about the prices and the cost of healthcare, the blame was constantly put on Medicaid, because Medicaid, the state doesn't pay what they need to. The percentage that they have to pay, they don't even pay that. They're always late on it. They don't do it. They find every way to get out of it. And so that's driving up costs. And then it's, oh, well, people don't pay their medical bills. And it's like, they can't pay their medical bills. This is not, I don't know. I see Band-Aid solutions being proposed everywhere. And this is something I'm running on a state level. Ethan, you're running on a state level. And there are things that we can do. But until on a federal level, it is switched to a single payer system where we can take back negotiating power. Because I'm sorry, I don't want to subsidize these entities. I think, yes, we need people to have access to healthcare, but in taxpayer dollar, I'm fine with having my taxes pay for someone's healthcare. But what I'm not fine with is these healthcare CEOs getting insane amounts of profit off of extorting people. It's a hostage situation. They have our life-saving medications. They have preventative care behind a paywall. It is ridiculous. And I just keep coming back to, like, we need to fix this on a federal level. That way it's not our tax dollars subsidizing these things, and it's accessible to everybody. And we have models from other countries to follow to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's lazy thinking, and it's intentionally being done to keep people really, really wealthy and powerful.
It's a lot more profitable to have people sick than it is to take care of them. Unfortunately, that's the perverse incentive structure we've got in this country. Unfortunately, we have to leave on that down note. Geez, thanks.
Sorry.
Before we go, I do want to give our guests a chance to tell you where you can find out about them and how you can support their campaigns. Gabby, where can the good folks find you?
All right, on Facebook, Gabrianna Gratzol for Senate District 11. And then my personal page is also, you can follow me. It's set to public. It's Gabrianna Gratzol Hartman, because I just never got around to changing my name after I got married. Yeah, and then my website also, if you just search my name is super unique, and you will find everything you need to. My Act Blue, my contact forms, all that.
not going to get you confused with another Gabrianna Gratzol out there. Ethan, how about you? Where can people find you? And
that's right. EthanForStateSenate.com. I also have a double last name, so not hard to find me. It pulls up all of my things as well. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on the things, doing the things. We're going to have a town hall in Harrison County on the 1st. You can go to my website, find more information about that. We're doing town halls every 2 weeks, kind of switching back and forth as we move through all 3 counties in my district. And we're also online periodically. It's always at the top banner of my website, EthanForStateSenate.com. And we're doing a campaign we're calling Minimum Wage, Maximum Impact, where we're trying to get 500 people to become donors to our campaign at $7.25 a month. $7.25 a month. 500 people. That's going to help us get a rolling amount of money every month so that we can do things like put up signs, get the word out, organize volunteers, because flipping districts like mine and Gabrianna's, it can be done. It just we have to have the buy-in of our neighbors in our community. And that's the really exciting thing right now. The excitement, people who are sick of the status quo and are ready to do something about it, is absolutely tangible. Every door I knock, even when people answering the door disagree with me about 90% of the time, they say things like, well, I'm glad somebody at least is running against the status quo.
Very good. So we find out where we can get a hold of our guests and learn more about them. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at HoosLeft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback on any of those sites. I am back tonight at 7 p.m. for a Progressive Indiana Network virtual town hall with 4th District Congressional candidate John Whetstone. He takes your questions directly in the live chat. Then I'm back Tuesday night at 7 p.m. with a live Who's Left podcast featuring State Senate candidate Kirsten Root from the Fightin' 21st. Also on Progressive Indiana Network this week, a pair of congressional debates. Thursday night, 8 p.m. in the 6th District. I'll be moderating that one. Saturday, we turn to the 9th District with Casey Blundell in the moderator's chair. Derek Holder has candidate interviews Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Hold 'em Accountable podcast. Concerned Clergy podcast drops Thursday. Brianna Newhart, the Recovered Republican, has new content Saturday. We can't do all this without you. Please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net. Once again, thank you to Gabrianna Gratzol and Ethan Sweetland-May for joining us today. I hope you'll support both of their campaigns, donate and volunteer for them, like, share, comment, and leave a review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.